Thank you. All right, so it is going to be a pretty intimate group. So if you could do me a favor, take out a pad of paper. I'm going to give you a lot of notes and comments and tips and so forth tonight. But my name is Tim Augustine. I am actually a brother. I was initiated in 1992 at Kent State at Beta Pi and have been involved in the fraternity ever since. I actually married a brother. We have 3 dividends. I have a 19-year-old, an 18-year-old, and a 16-year-old. And I think based on what Shannon has told me over the years, I've been to 73 lead events where I presented in 14 grand chapters. So happy to be here. Tonight, we're going to talk about landing your dream job. And as we go through this presentation, I'm going to stop after each section and ask if you have questions. If you have questions, put them in the chat room. If you want to raise your hand, or if you just want to blurt it out, that is fine. We have a smaller group tonight, so it will be fairly intimate. But just to give you a little bit of background about myself professionally, after I graduated from college, I joined a startup software company, was with that company for about 11 years. We ended up selling that company. And then I launched a company called Atwell. That is the company that I own now. My company is an engineering firm. We have about 1,100 employees nationwide. And we focus on 3 major industries. We focus on real estate development, renewable energy like wind and solar, and then we also focused on oil and gas. So I'm going to talk a lot about tonight urgent industries, or industries that you should think about when you're thinking about your career. But my first question that I want to ask everybody, and a lot of the seminar, by the way, is going to be based on a book that I wrote. My first book came out in 1995. My second came out in 2005, and my last one came out in early 2013, 2014, and it's called How Hard Are You Knocking? And the premise of the book is basically teaching you how to land a job from beginning to end, how to start your job search strategy, how to uncover urgent industries, what type of companies to look for and research, how important is an intern. Kristen, you mentioned that you have an intern coming up this summer. We're going to talk about internships. Then ultimately positioning yourself. What should your resume look like? What should you wear to land that first impression? What kind of questions should you ask in those interviews? So we're going to talk about the different types of interviews you're going to face. And then finally, we're going to talk about negotiating your starting salary. At the very end of the seminar, I am actually going to share my contact information. If you want to share your resume with me, if you want to share questions, email me questions, email me your resume. I'd be happy to take a look at it, edit it, and send it back. And so that's the premise of tonight, is basically focused on helping you launch your job search strategy, whether it's an internship or a full-time job, but ultimately positioning yourself to land a dream job. So my first question I want you to write down is, I want you to write down, what is your dream job? Think about any job that you can have. What is your dream job? Is it a CEO of a company? Is it a partner of an accounting firm? Is it you want to launch a nonprofit? You want to invent a product? You want to research cancer, have cancer research and genome research? What is your dream job as you think about life after college? And that's ultimately what I want you to think about tonight, is focused on, if that is my dream job, if that's where I'd like to work eventually, how do I work up to that? And it really starts with understanding the job market. So the job market right now is the candidate's job market. It is absolutely your job market. As I mentioned, I have 1,100 employees in the company, and we have 192 openings right now. We have 35 interns that we're bringing in this year. And this year, we've already hired about 250 employees. But having said that, it is your job market, meaning you have the opportunity to identify companies that you want to work for, to connect with them via LinkedIn or sending your resume, interviewing for those organizations. And ultimately, you are in the driver's seat. The unemployment rate is still very, very low. The amount of candidates that companies need right now is extensive. And so ultimately, you are in the driver's seat. However, keep in mind, there's a couple things that you need to understand about the job market. One is that companies are still interested in how professional you are. So when you reach out to them via LinkedIn or an email, make sure your email is professional. Make sure there's no spelling errors. If you're researching somebody on LinkedIn, you need to send them a message. Make sure it's a full message, no abbreviations. You're not texting people. That first impression that you're making when you first reach out to an employer or a person is ultimately the impression that they make of you. So understand that how you communicate and what you communicate is critically important. But here's what we're going to talk about tonight. I ultimately want you to think about, what industry do you want to work in? So what industry do you have a passion for? Do you have a passion for manufacturing? Do you have a passion for technology? Do you have a passion for new technologies like AI or virtual reality? But ultimately, what is an industry or a couple industries that you have a passion for? And then next thing is, where do you want to live after you graduate? So we're going to talk about urgent industries that are growing right now. We're going to talk about geographic preference. And then we're going to talk about how to dissect that market and narrow it down to 10 firms that you want to interview. So my first question I'm going to ask you, why you? So Kristen, I'm going to use you because you're on my screen. You don't need to respond to the question. But ultimately, if I'm an employer asking you, why should I hire you? I want you to all think about, what is the unique competency that you bring to my company? So are you a good listener? Are you very detail oriented? Are you a quick learner? Do you deal well with stress? Are you really good with C++ or Java or full stack? Ultimately, what I want to know is why you, because you have to understand, even though it's your market right now, there's also 50 other candidates that are applying for the same job. So you have to answer the question, why you, or why should I hire you, before you even step foot in an interview with me. So I want you to ultimately identify, what are those unique attributes that you think you bring to a company? What are the reasons a company would want to hire you? And what impact would you make? And by the way, you're the only person that can answer this. So I want you to start thinking about the job search strategy as a game. And I know it sounds foolish to say it like that, but ultimately it is a courting exercise. You're identifying an industry that you like. You identify a company that you're interested in. You research that company. You find a connection. You interview with that company. And ultimately, you're going to land a job with a company in an industry that you have a passion for. So what I'm trying to do is, I want to walk you through this whole process. And the first question I'm going to ask is, why you? The next question is, what industry do you want to work in? And there are all kinds of industries. It is amazing. The fastest growing industries in the country right now, I would say it's all around technology. So if you look at, there's a term called urgent industries. And urgent industries means, what is an industry that's expected to grow by 10 times over the next 10 years? I'm sorry, double over the next 10 years. So you think about, is manufacturing an urgent industry? Probably not. But you look at the Internet of Things. Every product is trying to connect to the internet. So your refrigerator is connecting to the internet. Your washer machine is connecting to the internet. Your phone's connected. So everything around technology and the Internet of Things is a huge industry to get into. AI is another urgent industry, where artificial intelligence, looking at ways computers and robotics are learning ways to do things. Genome technology, sequencing DNA, drones, renewable energy, virtual reality, nanotechnology. So the reason I bring this up is, it's important for you to identify a few industries that you have a passion for. Like I mentioned earlier, I'm in the real estate industry. And my consulting business is, we do real estate development, we do renewable energy, we do power and energy, or we do oil and gas. When a candidate comes into an interview with my company, I want to know that they have a passion for wind development, or they have a passion for residential development or real estate development. And so I would rather hire somebody with a 2.5 GPA that's passionate about my industry than a person that has a 4.0 GPA that doesn't care about my industry. Because as a growing company, I want to make sure that the people I'm bringing on have a passion for the industry that they're in. So besides the first question I ask, why you, the second question is, are there 2 or 3 industries that you kind of like? Manufacturing, technology, auto industry, travel industry, software technology, application development, travel, whatever it may be. Are there 1, 2, or 3 industries that you're interested in? The third question is, geographically, where do you want to live? Now, 2 years ago, I would have answered this question saying, start researching companies in the region where you want to live. If you want to live in Florida, ultimately focus on companies that are located there. If you want to live in the Midwest, focus on companies there, and vice versa. However, In the last 2 years, COVID has changed things. We as a company are hiring people in multiple geographic regions. We're hiring people in remote activity. I mentioned I have 1,100 employees. The majority of our employees are remote. So now it's really important that you identify an industry. And then ultimately, what I want you to do is narrow down the list of targets. So once you identify an industry and you have a passion for 2 or 3 industries, you have a geographic focus on where you would like to live, understanding COVID, but ultimately, I do believe that new hires need to have a location to go to for learning opportunities. Now, what I want you to do is identify 10 target companies. That's it. Not 20 companies, not 100 companies. I don't want you to shotgun approach. I want you to think about what industry am I interested in? Where do I want to live? And what companies in that industry are in that geographic region? And by the way, the list that you see right here, the logos that you see right here, Delta SIGs work at every one of these companies. So when we talk about leveraging your network and attending things like Grand Chapter, attending things like LEAD, or reaching out through the website or reaching out to alumni, ultimately what you want to do is you want to take that list of 10 companies and you want to start sending those 10 companies out to as many people as you know to leverage your network. You want to get the word out. For instance, send them to me and say, Kristen, I want you to send, or Jeff, send them to me and say, these are the 10 firms I'm interested in. Do you happen to have any contacts at those 10 firms? If I have contacts with those 10 firms, ultimately what I want to do is get your resume, we'll modify your resume, and then we'll hand deliver it. But the reason I want you to only pick 10 firms or less is there is a term called job search fatigue. Job search fatigue is where you get stressed out over boiling the ocean. The ocean is too big. Kristen, you mentioned, and I keep using you because you're on my screen, you mentioned you live in New Mexico. If New Mexico is where you ultimately want to live, then let's identify an industry that's in New Mexico. Let's identify 5 to 10 firms that's located there. And then we start doing our research for those 10 firms. So identify those firms, and now we do our homework. By the way, if you notice, all of these steps are prior to doing a resume. Now, you might have a resume from college. You may have done a resume your freshman year. You have a generic resume right now. That is totally fine. But the reason I work in this order is I want to identify a couple things. One is I want to know, my number one question, why you? I want to know, why are you unique? And you have to think about, if a company hires me, this is what they're getting. The second question is I want you to identify an industry that you like so you can start researching that industry. And my theory is that if you have a passion for an industry, you're going to enjoy your job. You're going to actually be interested in going into work. Once you identify the industry, then you identify a location. Then you can take the whole world and say, okay, this is where I want to live. Then you research your 10 firms. And now we go into the research. So ultimately, when you're researching these 10 firms, this is where candidates differentiate themselves. Knowing more about the company than the competition. So as I mentioned before, when I post a job, I might get 50 candidates. We interview 50 candidates via phone. Then we do in-person interview of about 15 candidates. Then we narrow it down to the top 3. And ultimately, it comes down to how much do they know? How much do they care about working at my company? So you have to identify things like, what do they do? What type of services do they offer? What type of products do they offer? How well are they known in the market? So go to their website, Google them, research as much as you can about the firm to answer a lot of your questions. Number 2 is research the culture. What is the culture like at that firm? So there are sections on their website called culture. You can go to websites like Glassdoor. You can go on LinkedIn pages about the company and talks about the culture. And then lastly is ultimately, what is their company's strategy? So this is what comes back to the urgent industry. You want to identify firms that are in the upper trajectory of growing, not shrinking. So for instance, if you told me I have 2 companies, I have an AI company and I have a company that makes compact discs, then I would argue that compact discs that technology is going away. We're going streaming. That industry is going to be dying. AI is going to be doubling. So it's important for you to understand that there are certain industries that are expected to grow faster than others. But I want you to identify, where is that company going? And by the way, if you have 10 firms and you research those firms, if you find one of those 10 firms that doesn't interest you, then move on. Take that firm off, replace it with another one. But the goal is to not wear yourself out or stress yourself out too much. So I'm going to stop right there. I mentioned ultimately why you. So what is the unique competency that you bring to my company? Number two is I asked you what your industry target was, or you can have 2 or 3 industry passions. Number 3 is geographic locations. And number 4 is targeting the top 10 firms that you want to work for and doing the research. Are there any questions around that content so far?
Hi, Tim. I have a question.
Please.
Yes. Regarding understanding how to convey one's uniqueness, either virtually during an interview or even in person, what would be the best way to respond or give an excellent answer without sounding robotic or giving a cookie cutter answer, but still showing your own personality with professionalism?
Great question. There's a couple ways to do it. One is you can do it in your writing. So when you reach out to me, say for instance, you want to work in the real estate, let's argue you want to work in the renewable energy industry and you're interested in working at Atwell, my company. Well, when you reach out to me via LinkedIn, it might be a simple introduction saying, I've researched Atwell. One thing about Atwell is your team environment and the culture of the company. For instance, our turnover rate at my company is less than 4%. So we talk a lot about on our website the fact that we have a lot of camaraderie, a lot of teamwork, great communication, and say one of those traits is a trait that you believe you possess. Well, when you email me a LinkedIn message, you could say that in the message. I've researched that well. I'm very interested in renewable energy, and one of the traits that I believe I bring compared to the other college students I'm competing with is I feel like I'm a good communicator, or I'm good at time management, or I'm good at teamwork. Whatever the competencies are, good example, Google. Google's number one competency that they look for is curiosity. So if you're a curious person, if you're an inventive person, and you reach out, you could say, I've researched Google. I'm a very curious person. I've been involved with a number of startups. I'm very interested in learning more about the opportunities of Google. So one way you can differentiate yourself is by written communication. Number 2 is when you are communicating, it's okay to brag a little bit. In the interview, when we're doing a Zoom call or a phone call or a face-to-face interview, you bringing up some of the traits that you've researched. I noticed that at Google, that curiosity is very important. Can you expound upon that? Because a lot of my friends ultimately tell me that I'm very curious, or I've launched a couple different products, or I've had a lot of good inventive ideas, or as a president of my chapter, we've done 3 or 4 different creative things that none of the fraternity has ever done. And one of the fundraising opportunities is we raised $20,000 doing that. So showing how you lived that trait, if you will, in an interview is completely appropriate. It's okay to brag a little bit about it if you've done your research and you identify that competency. Does that answer your question?
Yes, perfectly. Thank you so much.
Good, perfect, absolutely. So you have your 10 firms, you research the heck out of each firm. And I know I'm going to sound old school. Have a manila folder, old school, print off information, study information, take notes. Anything you read about that company is important. For instance, if you read about Atwell, you might have read that we just bought a company in Florida. Well, one of the questions you could ask me in an interview is, tell me about the expansion into Florida. I noticed that you bought Waldrop Engineering, and I know you guys had 100 people and you're expanding. Why did you do that acquisition? Tell me about that growth into Florida. Or you attended this conference, as it said on your website, around green energy, but the green energy was in the oil and gas market. Tell me what's going on in the oil and gas market that they're focused on sustainability. And again, if you notice what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to differentiate you from every other college student. When a college student typically walks into my office, they come in, they're dressed professionally, they have a great resume, they come in and say, I want a job. I'm ultimately interested in somebody coming in and saying, not only do I want a job, is I want to work in the renewable energy industry or real estate industry, and Atwell is a consulting firm that I'm very interested in, and you're one of my 10 firms. That's what I'm trying to get to in that first impression. And we'll talk about resumes, we'll talk about interviewing in a second. So this is where you leverage your market or you leverage your list. So at the end of the day, you're going to have 10 firms that you target. So first of all, send me the 10 firms. I'm going to give you my email address. If I know somebody at those 10 firms, ultimately what you're looking for is a foot in the door. Somebody that can take your resume, forward it to a buddy of theirs at that company and say, I interviewed Jeff, I interviewed Anoop, very good. They're Delta Sigs. I'm a Delta Sig. I want to introduce you to them. Maybe it leads to somewhere. What we have found in our research, so I went to Northwestern for my MBA, and we leveraged the Northwestern team to do market research for us in the last book. And we found that 82% of the people that we interviewed found their job through their network. So they didn't find them on a job board. Now job boards are fine. Indeed and Career Builder and Hot Jobs and all of the job boards are fine. But 82% of the people that we interviewed said that they found their job through their network, somebody that they know that handed them off. 91% said their success in their career is because of their network. So your network is a Delta Sig. We have 300,000 brothers nationwide. We have chapters around the world. We have brothers that work in multiple industries and multiple companies. If there are 10 firms that you have, there's bound to be a brother working in those 10 firms. So do your best to try to uncover what Delta Sig works at those 10 firms. Go into LinkedIn, type in Delta Sigma Pi and type in that company name. You will be amazed how many Delta Sigs work at those companies. And then the next step is you link in with them. I'm a brother from New Mexico. I'm a brother from the Northeast. I'm interested in working at this firm, at your firm. Would you spare 10 minutes on the phone in the next 2 weeks? Even that informational interview, getting a foot in the door, talking to them is huge. Another really good tip I'd recommend, if you know the industry that you want to work in, if you tell me you want to work in renewable energy, I'd recommend AWEA. If you tell me you want to work in commercial real estate, I'd recommend NAB. If you want to work in the software industry, I'd recommend the Chicago Software Association. There are industries and associations for every industry in the country. So the nice thing about being a college student is that you have the chance to join these associations probably at half price. But if you start listing those associations on your resume, if you start attending conferences as a college student or a recent grad, you're going to be blown away because very few young professionals attend industry conferences. So if you have the guts and you go to one of these conferences, obviously bring your business card, bring your resume in your binder, go around and start meeting companies within the conference. You will find that those conference attendees will be amazed that you're a college student attending these things. And that's a huge differentiator. Another one is professors and peers. Take your list, send it out to your professors. Do you know anybody that works at these firms? Do you know anybody in your peer group or in your professional group that works at these firms? And obviously, lastly, is LinkedIn and Facebook. Post your list of 10 firms on Facebook. You will be amazed how many people know somebody. It's like the 2 degrees of Kevin Bacon. It literally works. The challenge that we all have is we're worried about bothering somebody, or we're worrying about, oh my God, I don't want to inconvenience. I don't want to send Tim my list. He's a busy person, or I sent him my list and he never responded. If I don't respond, send me the email again 2 weeks later. I'm a busy executive as well, but ultimately my duty as a brother is to help other brothers. So having this target list will help you immensely in starting to open up corporate doors. And as I mentioned, if you find a company you're not interested in, toss them away and add another company. But try never to go over 10 firms, because going over 10 firms will get, you'll have a lot of fatigue. It'll stress you out quite a bit and so forth. Okay, so now what we're doing is you've networked, you've researched the firms, you've uncovered a lot of information. Now you develop a resume. Now, I mentioned earlier, you could already have a resume. That's completely fine. But chances are your resume is very generic. The reason I wait until this step to develop your resume is I think it's important to pepper your resume with keywords. Keywords that you learned from your research. Keywords of the competencies of the company. If the company says intellectual curiosity is one of their traits, make sure that's listed on your resume. If the position posting talks about C++ or Java or HTML, make sure those are listed on your resume. So it's okay to have a couple resumes to your name, by the way. You don't have to have one resume for every single person. It could be, you might have a resume for a sales position, a resume for a coding position, a resume for an analyst position. The jobs will be the same, but the descriptors might be tweaked a little bit as you grow your career. But here's the tips about a resume. I know this sounds old school, but I believe a resume should be 1 or 2 pages, and it should be 1 or 2 full pages. You should never have a page and a half of data. So if you have a page and a half of data, the extra white space in the second page subliminally tells me that you lack experience. So if you're going to do a 2-page resume, make sure it's full. Number 2 is I'm going to read your resume in 3 minutes. Make sure the resume has an objective statement or a summary statement at the top telling me what you're looking for, the type of position you're interested in, and why. Make sure you list at the very top is going to be your contact information. Make sure you list an email and a mobile number that I can reach you right now. Don't give me 5 addresses, an address here, an address after June 2nd, an address after July 4th. I want to know where I can meet you now, but most importantly is an email and a phone number, mobile number. Then you'll have your objective and your summary statement. Then you'll have your education. Ultimately, list your college, list your major. If you have an over a 3.0 GPA, list that. If it's under 3.0, don't list it. If your major if your major has a higher GPA than your overall, whatever your highest GPA is, your overall GPA or your major GPA, that's what you want to list. If they're both over 3 point, you're totally fine. Then you list your school, and then you list your the major that you have. If you have a minor, that's fine. If there are classes that you believe are unique, not consumer products or consumer behavior or statistics, everybody takes those. But if there are classes that you took as a college student that you believe differentiate you, then it's okay to put them in. The next section of your resume should be your work experience. This is where you want to sell yourself a little bit. You don't want a resume only result or task oriented. Don't tell me that you worked at McDonald's and you managed the fryer. I want to know is I worked at McDonald's, I was a shift manager, and I was in charge of inventory management. I want to know the results that you have. So if you were, and this goes for your fraternal experience as well, you're going to have experience as an intern. So list the company name, then indent, then have the position as an intern, talk about the company a little bit, talk about your internship experience, and most importantly, tell me what you accomplished. The next section might be voluntary activities or additional education, might be Delta Sig. If you were in charge of pledge education, how many pledges did you educate? If you were in charge of fundraising, how much money did you raise? I always tell people you want a result-oriented resume, not a task-oriented resume. I don't care about what you did as a task. I want to know what you accomplished. And this will tell the employer that you are accomplish-driven, not just task-driven. So that is your resume, 1 full page or 2 full pages. Now here's the other catch, and this is a differentiator, but again, I'm old school, is not only do I want you to email a PDF, never email a Word document, but email that PDF. You don't have any hyperlinks in your resume. Make sure all the text is black, but no hyperlinks, no light blue hyperlinks, no graphics, no photographs, just the content with bullets that's easy to read. But you want your resume to be 1 or 2 pages, but ultimately I want you to email that PDF. I also want you to mail that PDF or mail that resume. So when you find a company you're interested in, I want you to research that department head. I don't want you to send the resume to HR. HR is fine, but ultimately where I want you to get your resume is in the hands of the hiring manager. It's the person that needs this role. So if you're researching the company and you identify that I want to work in the sales or marketing department at Siemens, and then I want you to research on LinkedIn who runs the marketing department, I want you to find their address. Not only do I want you to email the resume, I want you to mail the resume as well, old school, and mail it in a large envelope. Typically, a priority mail might cost you 55 cents versus a regular envelope. They're always going to open up the larger envelope first. And again, it's old school, but I do believe that gets you noticed. And that's the part of this game, is that you want to get a foot in the door. You want your resume to pop. By the way, your resume should have no spelling errors on it whatsoever. So those are some tips about the resume, and I'll ask questions here in a second. Another document that you can attach is your cover letter. Now, here's the deal. Most employers no longer expect a cover letter. However, if you're in the design field, not only do they accept it or they want a cover letter, but they also want a portfolio. So if you're in graphic design or marketing design or landscape design, they're going to expect you to send a portfolio and a cover letter. And if you're in a writing role, like you're approaching a job around technical writing or marketing or copyright or press release or public relations, then doing a cover letter is great because it's going to show off your writing ability. And that question that you asked earlier about the competencies, this is another place where you can show your ability. How well do you write? How articulate? What's your vocabulary? The format of your cover letter is important. There's really 3 paragraphs. The intro paragraph, how you identified my firm, why you're qualified is the second paragraph. So you mentioned all the things that you're qualified for. And then third is ultimately what you're interested in is that is a meeting with me or a call to action. So those are typically 2 documents that I recommend, a resume and then a cover letter. Any questions about a resume or cover letter that you have? Okay, hearing none, let's go to making that first impression of what you wear. So again, my goal is to differentiate yourself. So even in a video interview, even in a phone interview, I want you to dress up because I believe when you're on the phone interview and you're dressed up in a suit, that you feel more professional, you articulate more professional, you are more confident. So my recommendation is wearing a suit for their first interview. The only time I don't recommend wearing a suit is when the recruiter tells you we are a casual environment, wear jeans. If that's the case, then wear jeans, that's fine. But if you're not told that, my recommendation is wear a suit. So let's talk about women. So first of all, I recommend, the colors I recommend for a suit are going to be black, gray, or black or gray or navy blue. I don't recommend bright red. I don't recommend fabrics that are lighter. I recommend wool only because they dry clean better and they look more professional. But like linen and cotton and things that can wrinkle up pretty quickly, I don't recommend that for the women's suit. I recommend a professional light colored shirt, nothing too low cut, no camisoles only, no lapel pins at all, because that's a distraction. If you are going to wear a pantsuit, totally acceptable. If you're going to wear a skirt, 1 inch above knee, 2 inches below calf. So no mini skirt, but no Little House on the Prairie either. No open toe shoes for women. I recommend 1 ring per hand, 1 earring per ear, not multiple earrings. No other facial piercings. My recommendation. And again, I'm giving you my guidelines for the first impression. If you have a nose ring, if you have a lip ring, if you have tattoos, and that's you, fine. If you feel more confident wearing a nose ring in the interview, wear a nose ring in the interview. I just caution you because some people will discriminate against things like that because they're worried that if you meet with a client, it could send the wrong impression. Having said all that, if that is you and that's your culture and that's the kind of culture you want to work in, then wear it and be proud and be confident about it. So that's what I recommend for women. For not too much perfume because we're going to be interviewing in an office space that's fairly small, and nothing too distracting. No bangle bracelets or anything like that that might be too distracting. For men, I recommend single-breasted suits. They button down the middle versus overlap. I recommend pointed collars like this, not button down. Button down is viewed as more casual. Pointed collars is more professional. Make sure your belt matches your shoes. Make sure your socks match your pants. So ultimately, what I want you to do is wear a light colored shirt and same colors on suits. I recommend black, gray, or navy blue. Stay away from pinstripes. Stay away from polyester blends that are really shiny. Ultimately, my goal is to get you noticed, and they will notice you in the first 7 seconds. That is when somebody forms a first impression. So when you walk into my lobby and you come to an interview or you're on a Zoom call, I'm going to look for how professional are you because I want to know, will you fit in a culture where we have to meet with clients? Are you a professional? Now, everything I'm telling you is for the first interview. After the first interview, if you kill the first interview and I say to you, okay, Jeff, you can dress a little more casually tomorrow. I don't mean necessarily jeans. I might say Dockers, dress shirt, and a blazer where you can take the blazer off. But ultimately, my goal is that you will not be distracted, or they will not be distracted when you walk in the door. Is that everything looks tight, everything looks professional. And I believe when you're dressed more professional, like Delta Sig, is that we're positioning ourselves in a professional way. And that is a huge differentiator in today's economy. I've had people show up with Doc Martens. I've had people show up with boat shoes. I've had people show up with shirts unbuttoned, third unbuttoned. I mean, you name it. Ultimately, my goal of what you wear is to land that first impression. So are there any questions about what you wear for men and women?
For women, you
Sure.
can heels, yes or no? Because
Okay, I recommend,
prefer not.
well, I don't recommend stilettos unless you can walk. If you can walk like a champ in stilettos, that's fine. I typically recommend 2 to 3 inch pumps, only because you're more confident on them. They're less vulnerable if you can't walk in them. But if you have heels, that's totally fine. I don't recommend open toe shoes for women.
Thank you.
Absolutely. All right. Any other questions about what to wear or landing that first impression? Okay. Now let's quickly go through the 4 types of interviews that you'll probably face. Now, the majority of you will face 2 or maybe 3 interviews of this type. Now, with COVID, a lot of things has changed. With the adoption of technology like Zoom or Teams, a lot of things have changed for the interview. But let's talk about the most common. It's a phone interview. A phone interview is simply that. I'm calling you on the phone. We have a 20-minute conversation. Now, here's what I'll tell you about a phone interview. Phone interviews are designed to screen you out. I have 20 candidates. I want a face-to-face interview 10. I'm going to ask you a series of quick questions. Why do you want to work for my firm? Tell me about yourself. What skills do you bring to my company? I might ask you compensation. In this stage, I would not recommend answering that question. Say compensation is not my driver at this point. I'm more interested in understanding the role and the culture. So don't answer the compensation question, but they're going to ask you, tell me about yourself. Where did you work? Why do you want to work for my firm? So a phone interview would just be that. I go back to dress up for the phone interview, have everything laid out in front of you, including your resume, have your research laid out in front of you, and most importantly, ask at least 2 questions. I want to know as an employer that you're interested in my company. If you ask me no questions, I don't think you're interested. So if you're not asking me questions, but I kind of like you, but this person that I kind of like has asked 5 questions, chances are I'm gravitating towards the competition. So make sure you ask a couple questions, and you don't want your questions to be things that you can easily find on the internet. Don't say how many offices do you have. You might want to ask is, I noticed that you bought a company in Florida. Why are you growing in Florida? Or I noticed that you're in renewable energy. Tell me about the growth of renewable energy. Or you might ask a question, what are the best traits of your top performers? So the people that you hire, why are they really good? What traits do they have that make them really good? How do you like working for the company? Tell me about the culture of the team that I'd be working with. All of those are fair questions, and it shows a genuine interest. Once you do the phone interview, then you come to a face-to-face interview. And this is where things have changed. I would say 80% of the interviews today are virtual. Not only because of COVID, but I think people have gotten used to it and people are now remote. A lot of people are remote, and doing a virtual interview is fine. Again, there's little things like, for instance, I have 1 picture behind my back. I don't have a lot of instructions behind my back. Now, I could do the blur behind my back, but I hate the way it looks when I move my head and it looks like I'm a robot. So having a setting for your virtual call is important. Having a microphone, like I have a Blue Yeti microphone and I have headsets so I can hear and my voice is clear. I try not to use the laptop. Having my camera, so my camera is not my laptop camera. My camera is an extra camera above my laptop, so it's eye level. All of those little things land that first impression. So if you're going to do a virtual interview, make sure it's professional setting, make sure you're dressed up, make sure you have the technology needed to do a phone call. get on the Zoom call a couple minutes early, but have everything out in front of you ready for the call, including your questions. If I ask you to come into the office, I want you to arrive 15 minutes early, bring your resume with you, a printed copy. You might have to fill out a job application, which is all places that you used to work. So bring that data with you, phone numbers, addresses, bosses' names, things like that where you used to work, because you have to fill out an application. Arrive a couple minutes early, and then ultimately you want to land that first impression with me and win me over. Keep in mind, recruiters put on their pants the same way you do. Don't put the recruiters on this pedestal. Think about everything we just talked about. You've done your research. You've identified an industry. You've researched 10 firms. You've uncovered my company Atwell. We've researched. Your resume looks really good. You are more prepared than the majority of the candidates that I'll see. So go in with a little confidence, not cocky, but go in with a little confidence. But understand that you're interviewing me as much as I'm interviewing you, because I want to hire you, but I also want to make sure you fit. So I want to make sure there's 3 things that I look for in an interview. Personality and cultural fit is number 1. Do you communicate well? Are you confident? How well would you interact with the team? Now, by the way, I have introverted teams that I'm hiring for, and I want to find introverted people. I have extroverted teams that I want to have people that are more extroverted. So not one size fits all, but I'm looking for personality and cultural fit. Number 2, education and experience. Education from college and intern experience. Getting an internship is critical in a way to differentiate yourself. Even if it's a small mom and pop company located where you used to live, helping them out, starting something new, writing a business plan, whatever it may be, having internship experience is critical, because it shows me that you at least have dipped your toe in the water. You've tried the working world. And then the last thing I look for is skills and knowledge. The type of skills that are a little bit deeper, the substance in while I hire you. Now, the last 2 interviews that you may face, not all of you will face it. One is called a group interview. And a group interview is where they do an interview it's a stressful job. Police work, social work, air traffic controller. Ultimately, those type of stressful jobs have group interviews where you might have 3 or 4 people that are going to be firing questions. They simply want to see how you react under pressure. Treat it like a face-to-face, answer every person that asks the question, and take your time. The last interview is called a meal interview. A meal interview is designed to figure out how would you operate in public. So if you're in a sales position or a customer-facing position, I might take you out to dinner. I might take you out to lunch. I want to see your manners. I want to see how you treat the wait staff. I want to see how you order. I had one guy order piping hot fries. And my comment to him was, what did you order? He's like, piping hot fries. And I'm like, so they didn't come piping hot, because they never do. And he sent them back. Again, I'm looking at this person. So treat a meal interview as if it was a formal interview. Couple tips. Eat before you go, so you're not starving during the meal interview. Order something that's easy to eat. Chicken fingers that you'll cut with a knife and fork, a small salad, something that's easy to eat, not spaghetti that's going to go all over the place. And then ask the person, what do you recommend for lunch? And they will recommend something that they're confident in paying for. Now, if they invite you to an interview and they make you pay, you might not want to work for that company. But if they have money with you just in case. But if they invite you to lunch, the reason they're doing is that they want to see how you operate in public. So make sure your manners are in check. You're dressed up for the interview. You're going to be doing the majority of the talking. So make sure you're treating people with respect. Make sure you don't send food back. Little tips like that. Any questions about the types of interviews that you'll face?
I have a question.
Please.
When it comes to recruiters, do you think they have more enjoyment in regards to individual face-to-face interviews, or do they prefer group interviews?
I think face-to-face. I think one-on-one. Group interviews typically are where there's 2 types of group interviews. The stressful kind that I talked about, where there's a panel of 5 or 6 people asking you the individual question. The other type of group interviews, like KPMG, Deloitte, Ernst & Young, some of the big 4, what those accounting firms do is they actually invite all their candidates in for a social time. Now, if you're over 21 and you have a drink, that's totally fine. If you're not 21, don't have a drink. My recommendation is to never drink during the interview, even if they offer you alcohol. I just think it takes off the the sharpness of your interview. Now, don't say I don't want to, don't make me feel bad for offering you a drink, but simply say no, thank you. I'll have lemonade or soda. It's fine. But what the top or the big four do is they will put all the candidates in one room and see how you mingle with other people. They're trying to figure out, will this person be able to operate with people they don't know? And in a competitive world, they want to see how competitive you are. So if they see you rolling your eyes to another candidate, or the other candidate says an answer and they see you shrug it off, that's not the type of people they want to hire. Because think about this. KPMG is doing tax audit. So they will put together a team of 5 people, parachute you into a company. You're in that company for 6 months doing the audit, or 6 weeks doing the audit. You have to be able to work with other people. That's the reason they do that group interview. Your question, do I think recruiters like that, or the one-on-one? Recruiters like to hire people they like. They like to have that connection. I interviewed a person today on a Zoom call, and it was supposed to last a half an hour, and it went an hour and 15 minutes because I enjoyed talking to her so much. She was outgoing. She asked a lot of questions. She gave suggestions on things that we could improve at the company. Fantastic interaction. That's the type of person I'm looking to hire because we have some connection. Your goal as a candidate is try to find that connection. And a lot of people will say, find that connection if they're a sailor, or they like sports, or I don't recommend being false. Like be careful, because you might see a sailboat and say, oh, are you a sailor? But if you know nothing about sailing, don't bring it up, because they're going to say, oh, you like sailing? And you're going to say, well, no, I just saw you on a sailboat. So be careful about those icebreakers. My recommendation is talk more about, tell me why you like working for the company. Have them sell the company to you, and you're going to see if they're passionate or not, and you're going to see if you want to work for that type of company. That's the relationship interviewers are looking for. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. Excellent.
Good. Awesome. All right, so we've gone through those 4 interviews. You guys have knocked it out of the park. You've done your phone interview. You've done your face-to-face. Now we're at some of the questions. Here are 3 questions that are great questions. What do you expect me to accomplish in the first 60 to 90 days? What are common attributes of your top performers? Like, who are your best performers and why? And what are a few things that drive results for the company? For instance, there's some companies that would say driving results meaning is our nonprofit is giving back to the community. That's what drive our results. It is having a retention rate less than 5% because we take care of families at my company. That is a driving result. It's not just about revenue or dollars. So asking those 3 questions are really great questions to ask, because you can't find the answers on the internet or on the website. It takes a little bit of thought. So these are 3 great questions. Then you go to your second and third interview. This is where you want to ask a couple things, such as, now that they bring you back and they want to make you an offer, this is where you start asking, for instance, what are your healthcare premiums going to be? So if they have a medical plan, they're not paying for your medical plan, you're going to have a premium. And a lot of companies have a single person premium, a married premium, a family premium. Some companies have like Blue Cross and Blue Shield. Some companies have Aetna. So there are certain companies that I think are better than others. So asking about their healthcare coverage, asking what it's going to cost you per month is important. Asking questions around training and tuition reimbursement. Tell me a little bit about your promotion strategy, or tell me a little bit about your training and development. Tell me a little bit about your onboarding plan. Like when I get like at Atwell, and I don't mean to keep bragging about Atwell, but when you join our company, we have a 90-day onboarding plan where you're assigned a mentor, and for 90 days, you're learning about the company, learning about services, meeting people in the company. Because our philosophy is that if we can integrate you in 90 days, is you're going to stay long term, and that's exactly what happens. So asking about training, 401k, retirement, vacation time. For instance, we have unlimited vacation. So if you're a salaried employee, you take unlimited vacation any days, whenever you want to take it. You just need to make sure your team is covered. How they do performance reviews, that goes back to my question. What do you expect me to accomplish in the first 90 days? What's my onboarding? What's my first year of experience, expectation? So asking some of those questions, I just think lifts up the hood a little bit. It gives you a little bit more confidence, especially if you're comparing 2 positions, is that you're going to look for certain attributes of companies, but these are great questions to ask. Here's the last step. is this a salary negotiation? Now, there's a couple rules of thumb. So I mentioned at the very beginning of the call is that it is a candidate's market, meaning there is wage inflation for sure. Wages are up for new college grads. Our interns were paying more than we've ever paid. But you also want to come in with realistic expectations. So do a little bit of research ahead of time. Go to salary.com, compensation.com, monster.com has a compensation calculator. You're going to go to salary.com and it'll tell you the type of role, geographically where you're located, years of experience, and ultimately what a salary range would be. But let's say, for instance, Jeff, I'm interviewing you and I want to offer you $50,000 a year. And here's what I'm going to say. Jeff, thank you for coming aboard. Thanks for all the interviews. Thanks for your time. We have identified you out of 50 candidates. So I'm already trying to guilt you a little bit. Hear me out. We've already interviewed multiple people. You're the number one candidate. We want to bring you in. It's going to be for a product support analyst. We want to offer you $50,000 a year. We'd like you to start in 2 weeks. Here's the offer letter. By the way, we've already ordered your business cards. I've ordered your iPad. Your iPhone's on the way. Your office is ready. We're ready to go. If you notice in my cheesy example, I'm trying to close you as a recruiter. My job as a recruiter is to close you. So I'm going to say everything I can. I'm not lying. All those things are happening, but I'm trying to encourage you to sign the offer letter so I can move to my job. Here's what I want you to do. I'm going to say, thank you very much, Mr. Augustine. $50,000 is great. However, can I talk it over with my family? And I don't care if you talk to the dog. I don't care if you're talking to anybody. Is that your goal is to not accept or decline on that call. Give yourself a couple days. Say, can I call you in 2 days? I'd like to talk it over with my family. I'll call you in 2 days. In 2 days, when you call back, I want you to say these words. Mr. Augustine, thank you very much. $50,000 is great. I'm really interested in your company. However, based on my research, I was really hoping to be closer to 55 to 65. So you see what I just did? It's a 10% premium. And I did it over the phone, and I did it in a humble way. I'm not asking you to be cocky. I'm not asking you to say, hey, I was hoping to 55. You're simply saying, based on my research, meaning you've interviewed with other firms, I was hoping to get closer to 55 to 65. You gave me a $10,000 range, and now it's up to me to say, do I want to give you 55? And my answer is going to be simple. I can either say, no, Jeff, 50 is our offer, take it or leave it. I can say, you know what? I'll give you $2,500. You just made $2,500 to say based on my research. Or I could say, you know what? I really want you. I will offer you 55, or I'll give you 50 plus a $5,000 signing bonus. Either way, you're starting the negotiation. Now, your first job out of college is going to be hard for you to negotiate. I get that, but you can at least try. Based on my research, 10% over the phone. Those are really good strategies to at least attempt that recruiting negotiation. The last slide, and then I'll open for a question. And you will use this slide the rest of your career. I do executive coaching. I talk to executives around the country. I coach them in finding their jobs and negotiating multi-million-dollar packages. I have found that these 3 bullets still are true. Number 1, personal satisfaction. Find a culture that you'll thrive in. You like going to work. You like the team. You feel respected. You like getting up in the morning. You don't dread the day on Sunday night. You don't dread going to bed because you have to wake up in the morning. You like the environment. So find a place where you'll enjoy. Number 1. Number 2 is find a place where you'll grow professionally. So professional development, growing, learning, training and development. They pay for a CPA. They pay for an MBA. They pay for training. Their onboarding is great. So you have to grow your skills. And third is financial reward. Every time I have found an executive take a job for money, they were gone in less than 18 months. Because money is not what drives things. Money is a result of doing a good job. And my belief is that if you like the company you're working for and you like the people and you're personally satisfied and you're growing professionally, you're going to kill it. You're going to do an awesome job. You're going to excel in your position. And as a company to keep you, I need to keep giving you promotions. I need to keep giving you raises. So that's why I put it in this specific order: personal satisfaction, professional development, and financial reward. So this is my email address as well as my websites, atwellgroup.com, not .com, atwellgroup.com is my website, as well as howardyouKnocking.com. If you're interested in any of this material, you can also buy the book on Amazon. But let me stop there. We covered a lot of ground. We started at the very beginning asking, why you? Tell me why I should hire you. What do you bring to my company? What are your distinctive competencies? I want you to list your traits that you believe differentiate you. Number two, is there an industry or a couple industries that you're interested in? Industries that you find you have a passion for, industries that are urgent, that are expected to grow, like the industries I mentioned. Is there an industry that you like? Within that industry, is there a geographic area that you want to live in where they might have offices? Then I want you to boil down that market geographically and industry-wise and identify 10 target companies. Research the heck out of those 10 firms. What does the company do? Products, services, locations, everything you can find out about the company in preparation for resume development. Then you develop your resume, cover letter if needed. You start preparing for the interviews and you get the list out to your network. You get it out to your network. They give you a foot in the door. You do an informational interview, which might be a casual interview or formal interviews. We talked about phone. We talked about face-to-face, talked about Zoom or virtual interviews, group interviews and meal interviews. Then we get down to the second interview, asking a lot of detailed questions. We talked about landing that first impression of your resume, cover letter, and what to wear. And then finally, when I offer you the job, we talk about negotiating your starting salary, and then the three bullets: customer or the employment satisfaction, personal satisfaction that you have, professional development, and financial reward. Are there any topics that I missed or that you wanted to have covered in today's talk?
I have a question, one last question.
Please.
Regarding the interview process, do you have any advice in regards to virtual interviews such as HireVue or particular artificial intelligence programs that are usually used regarding the first stage of the interview process? Do you believe that people should be a little bit more prepared in regards to that particular route, or should they be more comfortable in regards to traditional ways of interviewing?
I can only give you my personal opinion. And
Okay.
you know, there might be companies like that are doing AI and coding that will ask you to get online and code something before the interview. My belief is that I believe people hire people. And it is such a the economy, regardless of what the news is talking about, the economy is still very strong. Employers are still hiring, and employers are looking for those candidates that will be athletes. I don't mean sports athletes. I mean, I'm going to hire somebody that has the ability to do multiple things, that has the interest and passion to grow, that's going to ask questions. So the only way I can uncover that personality and cultural fit is one-on-one. So I believe truly that a Zoom call and a face-to-face meeting is traditional for me. Now, a phone call, some companies only do phone calls and then hire you. Now, one of the challenges that you're going to have, your generation is going to have, is there are a lot of companies right now that are remote. And for instance, we're remote. However, for new hires and even our interns, we're trying to bring them into our offices a couple days a week. So make sure you're asking those questions when you do interview. Now, working remote is great. And my advice to you when working remote is develop a routine. Get up every time at the same time every morning. Get dressed the same time every morning. Go into your office or go into your den or go into your kitchen table. But that becomes your office every day. And if you start that routine, working from home is a breeze. The challenge of working from home is where you get distracted with, I need to mow the lawn, I need to take my dog out, I need to vacuum the floor, I need to do dishes, all these distractions because you're not in a routine. So I say that because I believe that some companies might interview you virtually, do a phone interview, and then hire you virtually. And the challenge with that is that you just want to have some human interaction. So back to your question, I truly believe a Zoom call, a phone call, and a face-to-face meeting, whether it be on Zoom or face-to-face, is the way that I would recommend it. So to me, to learn more about the company's culture and for them to learn about you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that elaboration.
Absolutely. Great question.
We talked a bit about. Oh,
Sure.
sorry.
Go ahead, Kristen.
Talked a bit about having employees that are working completely remotely.
Yeah.
I find that it's a lot easier to like network with your fellow employees and be able to ask questions a lot easier when you're in person. Um, is there any good ways to do that sort of thing while you're fully remote?
Absolutely. I think, so we have done, my company is a little unique. We've done a lot of games. Like we've had teams do painting parties where they ask the company, we have sent painting kits, watercolor kits out to 25 employees. And there happens to be an employee that manages a Zoom call where they're painting online. We've had happy hours where we buy wine or drinks and send them out. Drizzy, I think it's called, that website where you can do that, but we'll send them so they have an online happy hour. But now that COVID is starting to slow down a little bit, one thing I'm finding, even with our interns, is they're asking to get together with 2 or 3 people in a like a Top Golf, or they're trying to do something out in society, out in the world socially, where you can still be outside and still social distance, but it's a way to get some connection. And I still think that interaction, that one-on-one interaction, seeing how people operate in public, is an important aspect of building relationships. So my recommendation is try to get creative, but be intentional. Like we have book clubs at our company. We have a book club right now that's doing how to win friends and influence people. We have a book club that's doing Start with Why. So there's a group of 10 employees that will read Start with Why, and every week they get on a Zoom call. And every week, Thursday at 3 o'clock, they all get on the call to talk about the book. So it's little things like that. But I think, Kristen, what you're going to find is you have to be intentional and it has to be structured. If you're expecting it to be random, like a water cooler talk in an office, that's never going to happen. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Absolutely. Well, terrific. My hour is up. Any other questions, please email me your question. If you want to send me your resume, by all means, shoot over your resume. Here's all that I ask. If you're going to send me your resume, send the top 10 companies you want to work for so I can edit your resume per those companies. But then if you have any questions at all, or you want to send me your list and ask if I can network, that would be great. I really appreciate you taking the time today. Shanda, thanks very much for having me tonight. I really appreciate it. And good luck to everybody. I hope to see you soon.
Just one quick thing.
Sure.